Welcome to Life-Changing Challengers, the podcast where passion meets purpose. I'm Brad Minus, your host, guiding you through stories of transformation and triumph, from endurance feats to overcoming adversity. Our guests defy the limits and inspire action. Ready to ignite your desire and incinerate your barriers? Join us. Your journey to the extraordinary begins now. All right, we're back. My name is Brad Minus. I'm the host of Life-Changing Challengers, and today I am so honored to have Rhonda Parker Taylor. She's an author, a researcher, also an entrepreneur, and she's got a really special story about overcoming adversity, learning disorders, and some other challenges that she came in through her life. So this is going to be an amazing episode, and I'm really looking forward to it. So Rhonda, how are you tonight?
I am great. It would be better if it would really turn spring in Indiana, but we have the eclipse coming soon, so hopefully it all will come out in the wash, but right now it's rainy.
Oh man, I'm sorry to hear that. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, so I understand what you're going through. The changes are crazy, and we're just about to head into winter. Well, actually, no, you're heading into spring. So everything's going to be much better. I know for sure.
Right now, you're dressing for all four seasons every day.
Oh, wow. It's that unpredictable, huh?
Yes, it's very unpredictable.
Oh, wow. So I always ask the same question of everybody. So could you tell us a little bit about your childhood, how you grew up, the complement of your family, and the environment that you grew up in?
Sure. So I'm originally from Indiana, but I'm not from the Indianapolis area originally. I'm from a small town called Noblesville, which is in the northern part of the Indianapolis suburbs. It was a very small town when I grew up. It's grown since then. As a matter of fact, I think it's considered one of the best counties that you could live in the United States right now. But it was small. And then I also went to a private school. So that school there was only 50 in my graduating class. That's how small. But it had very high standards. And if you wanted to talk about my family, they were a very much traditional patriarch structure, loving, but you definitely had to perform at your highest level. My dad's favorite saying was, if it's meant to be, it's up to me, which is basically would tell us that all the time. If you don't compare yourself, don't put yourself in that windmill. If you want to do something, then you have to be the one to do it. Don't expect someone else to do it for you. But that was kind of challenging because I was the baby girl. There was 5 of us kids. I have a little brother, so I was, the second to the youngest. I was people would say I was social, but at the same time, I was very timid. Things would frighten me, make me scared easily. So I was if I were to categorize myself as one of the dogs, breeds, it's one of those ones that just hides behind their owners all the time. It was a difficult transition for me sometimes. I flunked kindergarten. How do you flunk kindergarten?
That's what I was going to ask.
They told me
terrible, actually.
I just wasn't going to be ready, is what they said. So for me, socializing became my lifeline.
Okay.
And my older brother, I considered him the smart one. So I didn't ever want to compete. So I just kept navigating towards social and supporting my friends and my family. And so for me personally, I didn't do the self-development that I probably needed to at a younger age. And so, instead of worrying about what I needed to learn and my challenges and expressing some of the challenges that I had, I would navigate helping others and making sure for being successful. I would say that I probably had a learning disability. If I had to guess, I've done a lot of studying in my adult years. I would say I probably have some ADHD, not diagnosed with it, but just from knowing how I pop around. And my dad used to describe me as a butterfly. He said, you're like a butterfly. All you do is go from flower to flower.
Right.
So I think for me, the challenges also became what I used to motivate me too, because I got humiliated in some cases when I was not being successful, like maybe some of my peers or some of my family members. So a good example is we had to pass an English proficiency test and to graduate. And I flunked in my junior year, and you had to pass it with a C or better. So one of the teachers, the English teacher, her name was Miss Donnelly, she said, I'll tutor you over the summer. So I had gone out and gotten a job at Arby's, and I was sitting on her floor, in the afternoons and working at night. And the summer was over. My senior year was coming, and she had really gotten to know me. So this is where the power of a mentor really can make a difference, because she changed the whole trajectory of my life.
Really?
Yes, because I passed, and I went to pay her. I asked her how much I owed her. She said, "You just pass.
Pay it forward."
Yeah. And so she, she was probably only 98 pounds, just a little spitfire of a woman. And I found that I could be successful, and I could be that business person that I thought I wanted to be. And in my mind, I always thought I had to shift and go in a direction that would require the math, the writing, the English, and stuff like that. So I got to go to college because of that.
That's amazing.
And so then, yes, it was more like a junior college at first, and it was in fashion. So I went to learn to be a buyer, and I'm thinking I can do fashion. That was, the thing for women. And I went to the Dallas area, Fort Worth, because all the rich and single people were supposed to live in Dallas. Old people like me remember the Dallas and the Dynasty shows. And so I went.
Oh, yeah. Right. JR. Who shot JR?
So I went down there, and I learned that not only could I be successful, but I learned how to change the way I approached learning. I'd always tried to do it through memorization, and I always tried to do it through, the techniques of a person that needs to hear it or see it. And I didn't realize I needed both, and I needed to be able to do it with my hands, and really engross myself in it. So here I am, as a grown person with a doctorate.
That's amazing.
All the way through that, just because one person spent the time with me. But I had to be prepared. And that's the thing that a lot of times that people don't realize. You don't get opportunities unless you're prepared. It's not luck. It's opportunity and preparation meeting. That's what luck really is.
And what did your dad always say?
If it's meant to be, it's up to me.
There you go. That's it. You lived it. You absolutely lived it. I do want to ask a couple things, because I know that earlier in life, I don't know if it was high school or prior to that, that you had gravitated toward writing even then, but you found it difficult. Can you tell me how you felt or what that actually looked like, just in case that we've got somebody that's watching or listening, I should say, that might have some of those symptoms, that, to give them some hope and show them that, hey, there's a way to move past this?
Oh, definitely. So the first thing is, when I was taking a writing class, well, when I was younger, I was always carrying a book. I didn't realize it, but they were all way over my head, probably intellectually, but it showed that I had a desire to learn about the world. Here again, I came from a small town. Encyclopedias, karma, all these things that, that are really deep rooted. So that's the first sign that, wait a minute, where is this coming from? But for me, I had to write, and they said, what's your first memory? And I took that first memory, and it was in the writing 101 class. Here again, I couldn't write. And once I pulled that one thread out and saw the challenge that I had, it was the destruction of my pink blanket. That was my first memory.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Like when you're a little kid, when you're carrying a little pink blanket around. And it was when my brothers and sisters decided it was time for it to go.
They had to take your binky away.
Yes, they did. So what it did, though, is when I sat down to write, I realized that not only could it be about your emotions and feelings, but there was a whole world that you can build out there. So I wrote about the memory, but then I also made it into a learning lesson about growth and self-development because, I was in a writing class. And I found then that I really enjoyed pulling out that emotion. And I think that if anybody ever reads, whether it be any of my academic writing or my fiction novel, Crossroads, you'll find that I spend a lot of detail more on the people and what their emotions, like Crossroads explores the emotions of anger, fury, and envy.
Right.
And so I spend that time navigating the individual and trying to create a bond between the reader and the characters. But it's really also with me because we've all experienced all of that. No matter what your life is, and whether it be full of blessings or full of challenges or a little mixed of both, we've all gone through some of those emotions at some point. So the part about writing is it really assists one, whether it be for journaling, for fiction, for, work, whatever it is. If you put yourself into it and you create something that you can be proud of, then you've successfully completed that day, and that great day's great.
Oh, absolutely. And just for your information, everybody, Crossroads it's a suspense novel that she wrote, and you actually wrote it in 2000, but actually didn't publish it till 2023. Oh, there it is.
Here it is. It's Crossroads, and I do want to say that I'm really into the imagery part of things. So Indiana is considered the Crossroads of America because of the railroad tracks. Originally, the railroad tracks were here, and there's still railroad tracks, but everything went through Indiana to get to any part of the United States. And Crossroads is about navigating the world. And I wrote it in 2000. And the blessing of it was I was able to sit down and just write it. And it took me about a year to get it all ready. I had a publisher ready. And then my life started coming in unraveled. I was working in academics. I was also I had just gotten promoted to be a campus director for a local college. And then...
Hold on a second. We need to step back here. Just one quick second. Did you hear this? Did you actually hear this? This woman was talking about she had to have a mentor to learn to write. Now she's a campus director. Can we sit there and say what a complete 360 that this woman did? She went from borderline learning disorder to an academic. That's amazing how you were able to pull that out. And you did it with belief that you could do it, and a lot of hard work, obviously.
And you're that person. And I'm really glad you stopped and made me take a step back, because I think that anybody out there in your audience that's going through a challenge, I have a little jingle that I have for you. And it comes from Frosty the Snowman and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and it's put one foot in front of the other. And
Right.
so be walking across the floor. Any challenge that's out there, yes, you're going to have to take a second to gather your thoughts, practice the positivity to keep yourself from going over the edge. But then once you start putting those feet and putting a plan in place and staying disciplined and believing in yourself, you can stay in focus, it can happen. But you have to realize the true challenges of making it happen. And for me, I thought it was going to be that first time when I had the publisher.
Yeah.
Then the world fell apart literally in my hands. I am sitting in my family room. I'm writing a letter, believe it or not. I'm writing a letter to somebody, and there's a knock at the door. And that knock, when I opened it, was my adopted son's girlfriend and a police officer.
Oh.
And they came to tell me that my adopted son had been shot and killed at work. And that's the age group too. He was working at a bar as a bouncer, and they put somebody out, and when they came out at the last call, the guy shot this whole security team. And in that moment, nothing else mattered, of course.
Right.
That book sat on my desk after that for the longest. I always had all the intentions of the world to, get it published, but I hadn't found the lesson yet in it. I was still reinventing myself, because that challenge took me to a place that I'm like, can I really work with college students at that age, the same age as my son? And I knew that I could under certain circumstances, but being on a college campus was going to be too difficult. So I stepped back from that, and I created my own business, which was mentoring students that had challenges.
Oh, well, perfect.
Whether it would be they didn't know how to do a resume, they didn't know how to do the career search with the computers. And, a lot of people were trying to learn during that period about how to even do a job search with a computer, because it used to be just the resume. Now it's this whole new computer age, and nobody knew how to do it. And then eventually I pulled back the academics back into it and started mentoring for the people's master's and theses and dissertations. But I had to take the life lesson before I could take all those steps. And then one day I had to go in and I had to get something off a floppy disk.
Floppy disk, right?
Corrupted, and it had my book on it. And I looked at it sitting, because I had printed it at one point because I was getting ready to publish it.
Right.
And I looked at it sitting on my desk. It was still sitting in the same place it had been sitting. And I had images of me having to retype and edit the whole thing.
Oh, my God.
What we found in the lessons from losing a loved one and then looking like I was going to lose the book was that I had some skills that I needed to work on still. Being a life learner is one of the most important things you can do for yourself. And I was talking to my sister, and she says, why haven't you published it? Okay. And I was like, well, I'm busy and making every excuse. She says, that's not it. She says, you're afraid to make yourself vulnerable. Mm. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Of course I don't care if, people, she says, I don't care what people think. And sure enough, she was right. It required me to reevaluate my priorities. And I found that in that season and that moment, I had to take it a step back again and redefine, what the lesson was supposed to be for me too in the book. I wrote the book as a reason to elevate myself and my skills, and I started hiding behind making others successful.
I see. So when your sister had said, okay, is it you need to make yourself vulnerable, or is this going to make you vulnerable? Was it strictly about the writing? That it was your art, that you'd never put anything out there before, that you needed to get that done? Or was there a piece of Paris Pennington in you that you didn't want the world to see within this masterpiece of fiction?
I think it's both. I think that I fearful of putting it out there. Mm-hmm. But also, I think, yes, there is a part of every character in there that's me. You could say it's Pennington, but, I'm a people person. So even Billy Knuckles, who's the guy that has to debate whether he wants to be a rat against his friend or not, I've never been in that situation, but guess what? I could have been, because I was always putting people first, always putting, excuses for behaviors. I was always the more responsible one in the group, so it very easily could have been me. How many times have we had someone that's gotten into our car and we really don't know what they're all about?
Right.
And so, I think that it was, but Paris Pennington, definitely. People would always say I always had it together. Even though, and most people that, my story and known me since pre-kindergarten would say, I didn't know you had a learning challenge or disability. They thought, they were like, oh, you were popular, you had this. And it's like, they didn't know,
Right.
So undertaking the challenge of exposing that, hey, everybody's house is made of glass and it can be easily shattered. And mine's been shattered many times, whether it be, the death of, I've had several loved ones. I have a date that, I dread every year because I'm like, okay, who am I going to lose this year? Because everybody that I've known and loved has died on September 19th.
What? I'm sorry. That just threw me for a loop.
But it's the truth. And so it's like, that's a whole nother book that I could write,
Probably. Because
my mother died on it. 4 years later, my son died on it. Then my dad turned around and his was going to be, they were telling us that he wasn't going to make it. And, that it was September 19th and we told him, well, he's the same day as mom. And he said, no, let her have her day and do it after midnight. And so he died on September 20th. And then I have had an uncle. And then, it's like everybody. And I think that what I can hopefully tell people is to face those fears. Crossroads was a fear for me. You're right. Paris Pennington is a part of me, but isn't me. But it is. We all navigate the world with a set of core values. My set of core values that was handed down from my father and my family is, you must work. If you don't work, you don't have value.
Right.
And that's a big Midwest core value. And so that was Paris's core value. So yes, there's a lot of Paris that's in it, but I had to realize that the commitment had to be to me also. I run around for 20 years pushing people to be the best versions of themselves. But I had stopped doing the self-care, and I'm not talking about just, fitness self-care. I'm talking about the self-care of emotions, self-care of relationships, self-care of mindfulness, self-awareness, because I was doing it for other people. I was just pushing them forward and pushing them forward. And I don't regret that. Trust me, I have gotten so much joy out of seeing people break through their own barriers. But it was just time for me to give myself that same chance.
Yeah, there is a book, and you probably know about it because just because of your academia, but it's called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. You heard of it?
Yes.
So she actually defines that person, because I used to be that person too. Actually, I still am to a point, but I have come to a point where I've learned that I've got to take care of myself first and then move forward. But that took me a while as well. But she defines it as the shadow warrior. Is the person that's always pushing other people to get to their best.
Right.
And they're the ones in the back. They're the shadow. But that shadow never sees the light.
Right.
So that's what you were saying is a classic definition of what Julia said was the shadow warrior. That doesn't say that there's anything bad about the shadow warrior. The shadow warrior is most likely a very good person, but they don't do the things for themselves. They don't seek out the success for themselves. They only see it for other people, which is what you did, which is what I did in the same way. So yeah, I can see that happening. I do have a quick question for you. Was there any bit of that exposure of vulnerability that you wrote into Crossroads when the judge kind of outs Paris Pennington?
Was there? Yes, because I think that everybody's been in a position, whether it be a loved one, whether it be the court system, or whether it be, even yourself, where you've put yourself in a situation and then you're ousted, as you would put it. But also during the period of time when I was just before I wrote Crossroads, I had been part of the Crime Watch district. And it wasn't where I lived. It was where my church was located in the Indianapolis area. And they gave me a adopt-a-block area that was 6 blocks of about the worst in Indianapolis.
Oh.
And I learned a lot about the justice system. And even though the United States has one of the best justice systems in the world, it's not perfect.
Not even close.
Right. And there is no winners and losers. Everybody's a loser when you end up in the justice system, including the jury foreman, because you're in a vulnerable place, and you learn a lot by just being in the room, because it doesn't matter whether you're a victim, a prosecutor, a defense attorney, a judge, a jury, the family of the victim, the family of the perpetrator. All of them are in the room, and now they have to be there for a period of time together. And now you have to decide, okay, what am I supposed to learn? And that's what Paris went through. And I went through that many a times. I can remember this elderly lady that lived in those 6 blocks, and she would call my cell phone. That was just, around the time cell phones were really, hot. And she would call it and want me to call the police for her.
Oh.
Because she said they wouldn't come if it was from her house phone, because of the digits, they would know. So I would call and they would be there in minutes. And I realized that when I wrote Crossroads, I wanted to portray the imperfectness, but at the same time, the camaraderie of going through that process. And I thought that's what the whole book was going to be about.
Right.
When I first started the journey, but then I realized that the characters kind of took over, and their personalities kind of took over. And I'm like, oh, this is a little bit more than that. It's not just about the injustices. It's also about the people and what they're capable of and what they're not capable of. And obviously the 3 emotions that I had said earlier, which is anger is cruel, fury is overwhelming, but who can stand before envy or jealousy? Envy makes the bones rot.
Oof. That's strong.
And I realized that's a navigation that the world needs to hear even today, because how many times in social media do we try to compare ourselves? It goes back to some of the things that my father used to say that used to drive me crazy. It's being the youngest. Don't compare yourself to your older sister. Well, yeah, that's a little different. But today we're comparing our houses, our cars, our fitness, our jobs, our children, our, what they ate for dinner, cooked them best. And so what's wrong with just being who you are?
I get that. And I totally see what you're coming from, especially with the propaganda that seems to be being put out today. And it's causing those 3 emotions that you're talking about. And people aren't, in my opinion, people aren't thinking right.
Mm-hmm.
When facts are placed in front of you and it's right there in front of you and all the evidence shows a black and white situation, and all of a sudden everybody else is seeing gray. Somebody's putting one thing that becomes viral, and that piece of information, whether it's right or completely wrong, and takes over. It causes that fury and that anger, and that's all they see. All they see is the red, it's just in front of them, and they don't want to move forward, and they don't want to see the facts.
Right. And you get disgruntled with your own life.
Right.
And instead of just enjoying, hey, have you looked out your window of your house or your apartment? Have you gone for a walk? Have you enjoyed a puppy lately? And, whatever it might be that brings you joy, finding that life balance is very important, not to your mental health, your spiritual health, your physical health. Your body remembers everything. And trust me, I am the billboard of stuff happens. Mm. And if you don't learn to navigate that and be prepared, then when it does happen, life is going to hit. It could be today, tomorrow, a year from now, but it's going to hit again. So you should enjoy every moment the best you can. And it might mean that you had to work all day, but then enjoy the work that you're doing. It might mean that you had to eat a hot dog rather than a steak, whatever it might be, enjoy it. It might be that you saw a raccoon go through your yard, and I'm a big nature lover. So, that brings me the most joy. But if we can give ourselves a break and practice resilience, then we don't have to worry about all those emotions, because we'll tailor it down. Emotional intelligence is very important for everybody.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. So let's move forward. So let's go back to the story. Okay. Let's get back into Rhonda Parker Taylor's story. So your sister says, why haven't you published it? Mm-hmm. Is that the turning point where you decide, okay, it's time to get this thing going? You said that the floppy disk was corrupted, but you had a paper copy.
Right.
What happened after that?
There's four books on that floppy disk. So we were able to retrieve all but one, but it took me a while. I had to find, the right tech guru, and I had to really put myself in a position where I had to realize how important it was to me. It was one of those things that meant more to me than I'd ever thought it did. And I could remember going to conferences and them saying some of the best novels are in somebody's closet. And I thought, I don't want them to be cleaning out my house and find this book in the closet. It's, when I'm 80 years old or whatever year it is. So I started looking then, and I wasn't really sure which direction, because if you go the traditional route, it takes a long time. It took a year after that date to get someone that I could partner with. I ended up going with a blended matrix publisher, which means they help you with the publishing. They do that, but they also will help you with the marketing. And then you have a set budget that you guys both agree on, and it's contract. And so it's kind of both self-publishing and traditional publishing. They are their own publisher, and they know what they're doing. And I thought that was going to be the glory part of it. I was going to get it on. I kept telling everybody, I'll just be happy to see it in print.
Right.
And we're in the middle of the editing process, and they're like, we really think that you need to send this book to somebody and have them write the foreword. And I'm like, well, I'll be glad to get someone to write the foreword, and they're like, no, that's not good enough. And then I go, well, what are you talking about? They said, well, who do you think would best represent it? And I'm like, well, it's suspense. So maybe like a Tori Spelling, if I was going to hit the sky for it. And they're like, no, that's not the right person. We think you need to send a letter, and we'll deliver it to her and to her people, to Mariel Hemingway. And yes. For that are out there that are a little younger than us and don't know who Mariel Hemingway is, she's the granddaughter of Ernest Hemingway, the great author. And she also is an actress and writer. Also, she was Golden Globe, and I think Academy Awards also.
She was nominated for Academy Award. That's correct. Yeah, I was a big fan of Mariel Hemingway growing up. Yeah.
Beautiful woman. Beautiful. Yeah. I'm like, why would she care? I'm from Noblesville. I'm a small town girl. There's where that hold yourself back a little bit and not have the networking that anybody else. I would have been pushing them out there. And they said, just write the letter. So it took me the weekend to write a letter. And I'm like, well, we haven't gotten through the final edits. They said, no, she wants to see it in the raw. Huh? And I'm like, okay, here we go. So I got it together and the letter and, introduced myself, and it took about a couple weeks, and they brought it back. That she wanted to write the foreword, And she also did a YouTube video that's out there. I think it's called Meryl Hemingway praises Rhonda Parker Taylor's Crossroads. And I'll tell you, anybody that's out there that has a dream, actualize it, picture it, do it, practice your self-care and provide yourself purpose and be realistic, because it's not always the pie in the sky. But when I heard that video and her explaining why that she was putting it part of her book club, and that was that everybody in life comes to a crossroads at some point in their life. And she explained that she had to, with her family having mental health issues, and everybody in Crossroads has something. She said, then there comes to a point in your life that when you hit that crossroads, that you have to realize that even chocolate has an expiration date. And I was like, oh my goodness. She got it. She got the point that sometimes you have to navigate and change so that things don't happen to you. Crossroads is like a game of clues, Agatha Christie clue game, where I try to provide just little tidbits about why people have different kinds of motivation. And she got it. And even though things were happening to Paris and people were dying and getting sick and everything, really, it all could have been avoided. It all could have been avoided had she navigated her world with purpose. And her own purpose, not everybody else's purpose. So, yes, we have the crime thriller and the judge and this, but really, deep down, had she been more aware of her life, she could have avoided a lot of it.
Yeah, it is an amazing book and really written well. I mean, it takes you from the first chapter. You do an amazing job at background, and you get to the background. I felt it pretty quick. Now, there's a couple of reviews that you got that people thought that it was a little bit slower getting to that point. I don't think so. I think you hit the nail on the head with the amount of background, especially when you started out with Detective Brown and then Paris, and then going into the office, and then her, and her need to satisfy her boss and the whole thing. And I thought the background was fantastic. And then you get into the trial, and and it just rocks and rolls from there, right?
Right.
So, yeah. So you're absolutely right. Meryl Hemingway praises Rhonda Parker Taylor's new release, Crossroads. And you really need to read this book, because it is something else. I got to tell you. And I usually would end and I'd ask you for some steps that you should take, but you just rattled them off. Basically, the steps that, hey, if you want to do something, visualize it, and don't let things stand in your way. And especially, don't let your need to help others stand in your way. Did I get that right?
That is exactly right. And I have a workbook coming out. It'll probably be self-published, because it takes life balance, and it helps people that has that same problem. And you say you did the same thing. You put it.
I did.
One of the things I found that I was doing, and I did this with my classes a lot of times, I would do these exercises, but I would say, okay, I'm perfectly balanced. I do 30% this, 30% this, but the joy wasn't a part of it. So then I sat down and did my own exercises, and it's like, oh, well, I'm watching 10 hours of television, and it's 50th on my list of things that I enjoy doing. So it kind of helps navigate. And I use the Crossroads, and I have the case studies of the different characters in it. But that people can try to relate that you're not alone in this. This is a daily struggle for most people to have balance and to bring joy in their lives and to put themselves first. And those that aren't putting themselves first, they're not balanced typically either, because they're too far the other directions. So I'm hoping that as I continue to write, because I plan to, that I can take these life lessons that we do and put them in the characters to make them real.
incorporate the things that you've learned
Yeah.
and then help those characters develop that way. That's actually pretty brilliant, Rhonda. That's pretty brilliant. Yeah. To be able to take, because I love books like this. This is something that I read all the time. I read Black Banner and Luke Wilson and these guys that have these like really delicate, thrillers out there. And I love them. So this was like right up my alley. But the way to incorporate, I don't want to call it self-development into the characters, that's brilliant, because not only does it become a recreational activity, but it becomes a self-development activity. So you're getting two things in one. Like you were mentioning a list, your TV was the 50th, but if 3 or 4 is reading crime novels and 5 and 6 and 3 and 4 is self-development, there you go. You get to fit it right in. You get 2 for the price of 1. That's pretty brilliant. I love that idea.
Yeah, and I think that we all can learn from fiction. I talked about the workbook, but the second book, I take the girl that's at the end that got in the car with the wrong people and got herself in trouble. I take her and I take a totally different approach to how she gets involved in things. And it's not only her being naive, but her inability to tell right from, good from bad. And this really just that openness that can get you in trouble too. So and many a times we develop people to be victims.
I get it. Give me one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you got the workbook coming up, and then what you were saying about the book with the character from the end.
Right. And it's, the working title right now is called Chosen.
Okay.
And it's basically, it navigates how people sometimes that aren't aware, especially young people, can get themselves in situations where they're victimized.
That's something that needs to be put out there right now. Because, I mean, the funny thing is with social media and everything right now, I feel like some of high schoolers get victimized and don't even realize it until it's too late.
Right.
I coach high school cross country and track and field, and I see what's going on. You know what I mean? They talk about it and it's kind of in the background, and these perfectly cheerful and kids that are brought up in great homes get caught up in this mess, and it's tragic. And, I watched some team members, have like weighted GPAs of 4.15 and 4.0, and then turn out and have, 3.3, 3.4 the next month, the next year, because of something that happened. And so that is a book they're going to be definitely important to be looking out for. But yeah, that's amazing. So I am extremely excited to hear about that one when you come up and publish that one. So for everybody out there, Rhonda Parker Taylor.com is where you can find everything, including that incredible YouTube video with Muriel Hemingway talking about Crossroads. You can find the links to Crossroads for Amazon and Barnes & Noble on her site, but I'm also going to put it in the show notes so they can directly go right to that and find it on Amazon.com, find it on BarnesandNoble.com. I'm going to make sure that the link's right there. But you guys got to read this book. And then, of course, she's got some other books coming up that we're going to be looking for. So, Rhonda, listen, thank you. Thank you so much. I can't imagine. You are an inspiration to all of us that had troubles, in school. I wouldn't have a learning disability. I was just lazy. But I felt like I did. And I got over it in a different way. It was more of a pounding on the head. But you're an inspiration to where you couldn't write, and then all of a sudden now you're a professor at a college, and then getting your own business. And I just think it's amazing, and what you've done, and what you've taught us today about taking time for yourself, having a balance, and to go after your dream. Visualize it, go after it.
That's right.
Because
if it's meant to be, it's up to me.
There you go. That's perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Rhonda, for spending this time with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And everybody out there, Be blessed and have a great day.
Thank you. We'll see you in the next one, everyone. Well, that wraps up another episode of Life-Changing Challengers. I'm your host, Brad Minus, saying thank you for joining us on this journey of transformation. If today's stories inspired you, please take a moment to review, share, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us reach more listeners and create an even bigger impact. Remember, every challenge is a chance to grow. Until next time, keep pushing, keep challenging, and never stop pursuing your extraordinary.